Carrie Lam meets central government officials in Beijing on national security legislation for the SAR. An AmCham survey finds 60% of 180 members surveyed think the national security law will harm business operations in the city.
Hello and a very good evening. Welcome to TVB News. Chief Executive Carrie Lam today met with central government officials in Beijing on national security legislation for the SAR.
She told reporters afterwards that Beijing officials reiterated the new law would not affect the rights of the majority in Hong Kong. The city's chief executive spoke to the press after a 3-hour meeting at Zhongnanhai in Beijing. She was accompanied by Secretary for Justice Teresa Cheng, Secretary for Security John Lee, and Police Commissioner Chris Tang. Lam said they met Vice Premier Han Zheng, Minister of Public Security Zhao Kezhi, and the Director of the State Council's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office, Xia Baolong. Citing Han, she noted the national security law being drafted by the National People's Congress Standing Committee aims to comprehensively and accurately implement the one country, two systems principle. The new law will also seek to safeguard the country's sovereignty, security and development interests, as well as Hong Kong's long-term prosperity and stability. Han was quoted as saying the new law would only punish the minority who severely threaten national security by actions and would not affect the rights that the majority enjoys. The CE also slammed international condemnations against the law.
That the international community and some of the foreign governments have been adopting blatant double standards in dealing with this matter and commenting on this matter. It is within the legitimate jurisdiction of any country to enact laws to protect and safeguard national security. USA is no exception, UK is no exception. So why should they object, resist, or even condemn and take sanctions against Hong Kong and the People's Republic of China? Hong Kong people's confidence lies in one country, two systems, and all the strengths and competitive advantages of Hong Kong. It does not lie in what individual foreign governments have to say about Hong Kong.
Tonight, the city's chief will fly to Shenzhen and head back to Hong Kong tomorrow morning.
Meanwhile, the city's second highest ranking official spoke exclusively to TVB about the controversial national security law.
Acting Chief Executive Matthew Cheung asked the people of Hong Kong for patience and trust as the administration works with Beijing to ensure the law will be in line with the city's legal system. Haley Zhou reports.
We understand people's concern. Basically, they're concerned about whether the existing freedoms, legal rights enjoyed by Hong Kong people, whether the high degree of autonomy, whether one country, two systems will be jeopardized in the process by this bill, this particular law. The chief executive will reflect truthfully and honestly.
How can you make sure the law will be absolutely in line with Hong Kong's legal system, also will be implemented in the exact same way the other laws are implemented in Hong Kong?
Because it will be implemented within the framework of common law system in Hong Kong jurisdiction.
But Cheung admitted the people of Hong Kong would be in the dark about the law's details, including the city's lawmakers.
We're not saying that they are not allowed to discuss, but they raise questions about it. And the questions are all about what happens if in the moment the whole thing is still being fluid, it's being drafted.
People won't be able to see the content of the law until it is endorsed. But wouldn't that be too late when they start to discuss after every detail is...
Because it's national law, it's not local law. You have to understand it.
But he made it clear that under the new law, acts against the local authorities will also be regarded as subversion against state power.
Oh yes, of course, because Hong Kong is part of China. But national security knows no boundary. National security does not stop at one country and two systems.
Regarding planned U.S. sanctions on Hong Kong, Cheung says the city will weather the short-term impacts, and in the meantime, it will diversify its trading partners.
We can weather the storms, as we did in the past. And also we'll be trying to embark, doing a lot more, open up the ASEAN market, the trade market.
He hopes the new national security law will bring Hong Kong stability, which will help the one country, two systems framework last beyond 2047 and eventually help the city move towards a fuller democracy.
In Hong Kong, we do enjoy the real substance of real freedom, which is not available in many so-called democracies. We don't have the trappings, all right, of a full-fledged Western democracy. Yes, we're moving towards that direction, slowly, gradually. So the 3S, stability, safety, security, coming together. And that legislation will provide a very firm basis for us to provide that assurance in the long-term future of Hong Kong.
Haley Zhou, TVB News.
The Hong Kong Bar Association has written to the National People's Congress Standing Committee asking for a public consultation on the national security law. It says once the legislation is promulgated, it will affect the city's 7 million residents and enterprises, including foreign businesses. It also says there are differences between the judicial systems of Hong Kong and the mainland. The association thinks the NPC Standing Committee should consult the people of Hong Kong on the matter, apart from the Basic Law Committee and the SAR government. Meanwhile, political activists are urging European leaders to voice out.
Around 15 countries in Europe still have not openly showed their stand on the national security legislation. When Hong Kong is already under threat and time is running out in this global city, we wish to continue our protests on street and also international advocacy and let more people around the world to know that how we continue the fight and urge Beijing stop the implementation of this evil law.
A survey conducted by the American Chamber of Commerce shows nearly half of the respondents are pessimistic about the city's medium to long-term business outlook. This amid rising political and economic uncertainties concerning China and the US. More than 80% of 180 members of AmCham Hong Kong are moderately or very concerned about the national security legislation. 60% also deem that the new law will harm business operations in the city. Among the concerns cited were the SAR's eroding autonomy and potential impacts on the city's legal, financial and judicial systems. Still, about 70% of those surveyed have no plans to relocate their firms. While a wait-and-see attitude largely prevails, contingency business plans are in place for about a third of the respondents.
On to other news now, and there were no new COVID-19 cases reported in the city today. That good news comes as the Education Bureau earlier decided to deliver results for the central allocation for Primary 1 admission through the post amid the pandemic. As Pinky Wong reports, results will be mailed today and tomorrow.
This robot greets Primary 1 students-to-be, checking their temperatures when they arrive at this school. Unlike previous years, parents did not need to pay a visit to the designated collection point for school allocation results. This year, around 27,000 children took part in the process. More than 85% were allocated to their first 3 school choices. Those who are not happy with the results may visit subsidized or private schools. Some schools are switching up interview methods to go online. There's also changes to face-to-face interviews.
Last year, we have 8 persons in a group, and this year we have just changed to 4 students in a group. We have a small group for discussion, and they can communicate with other students. Each group we have 2 teachers to serve 4 students. The teachers can help them to keep the mask and clean.
The principal said all visitors coming for interviews, parents and children, are required to wash their hands in one of 2 sinks provided after their temperature check.
If parents have not received results by post by June 5th, they can collect them at the designated collection center on June 6th and 7th. Pinky Wong, TVB News.
Welcome back to TVB News. Tens of thousands continued their demonstrations for an 8th consecutive day in the U.S. in protest against the death of an African-American man in police custody.
But officials say the demonstrations were mostly peaceful, with fewer reports of the violent rampages that have shocked America and the rest of the world. America's anger over the death of George Floyd has simmered down, at least for the time being. Tuesday marked the 8th straight night of the protests, which began after a white Minneapolis police officer pressed his knee against Floyd's neck, while the handcuffed black man called out that he couldn't breathe. While protests against his death continue, officials say they were largely peaceful and calmer than before. There were scattered reports of looting in New York and in other cities across the United States. But the scale was less severe compared with the unrest of the past few days, which has seen shootings, looting and buildings burned down. The calmer protests came as many cities intensified their curfews, with authorities in New York and Washington, D.C. ordering people off the streets while it was still daylight. In the U.S. Capitol, a block away from the White House, thousands protested following a crackdown a day earlier when police officers drove protesters away from Lafayette Park.
I'm here because I'm sick and tired of seeing black men and women be killed and nothing be done about it. I'm tired of it.
More than 20,000 National Guard members have been called up in 29 states to deal with the violence. New York is not among them, and Mayor Bill de Blasio says he does not want the Guard.
We do not need, nor do we think it's wise for the National Guard to be in New York City, nor any armed forces. I'm going to tell you why. This is really important we have this out right now. If someone needs a history lesson, when outside armed forces go into communities, no good comes of it.
But New York Governor Andrew Cuomo blasted de Blasio and the NYPD for allowing the looting to get out of hand.
Keep going, keep going. The police must stop the looting and the criminal activity. That is the essence of the police force. They are supposed to protect the community, protect the property. They did not do that in New York City last night.
Also Tuesday, Minnesota opened an investigation into whether the Minneapolis Police Department has a pattern of discrimination against minorities in the wake of Floyd's death. And in a related story, Protestant and Catholic leaders in America have criticized Trump after protesters were forcibly dispersed so the U.S. leader could stage a photo op at a church near the White House. A handful of Republican senators also spoke out against Trump. Still, most Republican lawmakers have stayed largely silent or refrained from criticizing the president. In a memorable scene captured live on television, police cleared Lafayette Park so Trump could walk to nearby St. John's Church and pose with a Bible. Trump's actions drew widespread condemnation from Democrats and religious leaders who said he was misusing the Bible and the church.
We have a president who is a reality television star, but the church is not a reality television set, and the Bible is not a prop. As he was standing there holding the Bible, I thought to myself that he should try reading it, where it says, "Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God." We have seen in this president neither a commitment to justice making, where criminal justice is reform is concerned, or any other justice issue. We have not seen mercy. Certainly that was not demonstrated or given to the protesters or to those who are sick in our country suffering from a deadly airborne virus.
Back locally, civil servants will have their pay frozen for 1 year, a move that has been met with mixed reviews. Jackie Lynn reports.
Amid uncertain times, even those with a so-called iron rice bowl will also need to tighten their belt. The administration has decided to freeze the pay for the city's 180,000-strong public servants this financial year after considering its beleaguered fiscal position and the general pandemic-hit economy.
We are facing an unprecedented, difficult situations now in Hong Kong. They have taken into account the pay claims and also the views and concerns expressed by the staff side.
But these legions of disciplined service unions disagree.
As the largest employer of Hong Kong, we expect the Hong Kong government to be the role model among others, to adjust the salary of the employees in order to maintain our purchasing power.
The pay freeze also ruffled the feathers of the city's largest civil servant union, but for a different reason. They want the pay frozen for 3 years instead of 1.
The decision of the government is very short-sighted and is lacking of a long-term vision.
The union plans to withdraw from the government-appointed Pay Trend Survey Committee, which suggested a pay rise of almost 2% this year for civil servants.
Some special conditions actually cannot be revealed in the data. Conducting the survey in such abnormal economic condition, if it is not meaningful or the result is likely to be doubted by all walks of lives, then we think that it is meaningless for us to participate in the survey.
If the union eventually confirms its decision to bow out of the panel, it will mark the first time in 46 years that it was not part of the committee. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
The house where Adolf Hitler was born will be turned into a police station. This follows years of debate over how best to prevent it becoming a pilgrimage site for neo-Nazis. Australia, which owns the property, invited architects to submit plans for a redesign of the building. It will house the local police force's offices. The Austrian government hopes neutralizing the impact of the building will deter right-wing extremists and neo-Nazis to travel there to express their ideologies or hold protests. That's the news for tonight. Thanks for watching.
Good night.